very excited to be here and doing this presentation with you all. I am super passionate about exercise and lifting weights, and I'm hoping that you guys will notice that as we go along here. Yeah, so I wanted to do a little presentation here about the positive health effects of exercise. I think we all know that exercise is good for us, but to exactly what extent and how to go about sort of achieving best results, especially with minimal effort, is something that I think we could all learn a little bit more about, right? Um, so before we get into all that, a little bit about me. I've been a personal trainer for over 5 years. I'm from Richmond, Virginia. Go Richmond, go RVA for all the Richmonders out there, should they exist. Went to VCU for applied mathematics. I studied there I was at VCU for several years, and sort of throughout my studies in mathematics, the gym was a very good place for me to take a break from my studies, and sort of through doing that, I kind of sort of fell in love with fitness in that way. So I more or less abandoned ship on the mathematics and got myself a personal trainer certification, and I've been doing personal training ever since. And honestly, I haven't looked back too much. I sort of was telling Michelle and some colleagues before that I did math because I was good at it, not because I really liked it. And I found that I really do like this stuff, and I love learning about it. I'm always listening to some podcast. One of my clients the other day called me a bro nerd, and I was like, oh, that is the best compliment I've ever heard in my whole life. I'm so happy to hear that. Anyway, so I kind of got into fitness and lifting weights through volleyball. Played a ton of volleyball as a young man. I played into college, played pretty competitively, and my coach was like, hey, for you to get much better at this, you need to get to the gym. So, okay. And so that's sort of what brought me here. Yeah, I really like lifting heavy stuff. I like picking up heavy circles and putting them back where they were. I get a lot of fun out of that, and a lot of my clients do too. So, and a little bit more about me. I love playing video games, and board games especially. I find myself playing a lot of Dungeons and Dragons with my family when I get a chance. And I have a cat named Salem. I forgot to link the picture. There's supposed to be a picture in the corner here. She's a sweetheart. We can send pictures later. Anyway, on the exercise itself, right? So yeah, like I said earlier, right? We all know that exercise is good for us, but just exactly how, right? And I wanted to really kind of make the sort of the full, not the full list here, but a really good list in terms of things that we know exercise does for us, right? Exercise improves our bone density. This is something that becomes particularly important as we start to get older, and particularly for women when it comes to osteopenia and osteoporosis. Lifting weights can be a really, really good way to counteract bone density issues as we get older. Lifting weights and training in general reduces injury risk in everyday life. This is something that's super impactful for my clients, right? I've found over the years that through training that my clients are in less pain and they get hurt less. There's oftentimes this concern that lifting and getting into physical activity can, put you at a higher injury risk. And if you don't go about it the right way, yeah, that can be the case. But yeah, the research is pretty clear that when you are strength training, when you are being more active, when you're walking, when you're hiking, things like that, right? These activities contribute to and reduce injury risk down the line, right? Exercise also reduces anxiety and depression. This is a particularly big one for me. It's one of the reasons that I do it as much as I do. I was telling Michelle and some colleagues that it's kind of the biggest thing for me. I, getting into exercise when I was in my early 20s was a really good way to help me manage my anxiety and depression. And it's also the case, this is still the case today. I find that, if I don't lift something heavy for 4 or 5 days, I'll be a little more anxious and more depressed. I'm like, man, what's going on? And then I'll lift something heavy and I'm like, oh, okay, I just needed to train. I was just a little, I don't know. So that's something that I am a huge believer in. And it's honestly one of the part of the reason why I'm super excited to be working with Michelle and you all. because I think that we often have a tendency to think about the sort of physical health effects of exercise and kind of discount the mental health effects. And especially in some of the previous jobs I've had working for gyms and stuff, right? The sort of focus on the mental health aspect of exercise is something that hasn't been there. And I'm really excited to be in a situation where I can, bring exercise to more people and really show people how much their anxiety and depression will improve through exercise. So I'm super excited about that. Similar to the reduction in injury risk, we see reductions in pain from training. One of the things that can be really irritating about how pain works is that we can be in pain sometimes when we're moving, or maybe moving too much too fast. And similarly, we can also be in pain when we're not moving, which is really irritating. We often think that when we feel a little something in our shoulder that we should rest it for a long period of time. And sometimes that pain can even get worse from rest, right? So one of the things that I've really focused on over the years as a personal trainer is getting a really good understanding of pain and really helping people manage pain in the gym to reduce pain overall, right? Exercise improves blood pressure. My blood pressure, I've always had somewhat high blood pressure despite being in reasonably good shape. But over the years through training, my blood pressure has gone down. So super, super pleased about that. It increases energy. As we train more, as we move our bodies more, we activate more of this parasympathetic nervous system, which helps our body be more awake, be more, quote, aroused, as they might say in the exercise science, right? So moving your body around helps you have more energy, feel more active, right? And in doing so, we improve our circulation. My girlfriend has Raynaud's disease, where she has issues with her hands and feet being really cold, but she does a good job of moving around. She has no issues with this, and everything's good. Right? Yeah, there's some really awesome effects of exercise. More effects even. So we see lots of reductions in diseases, non-communicable diseases, as we train, as we exercise. We see reductions in heart disease, stroke, heart attacks, type 2 diabetes, fatty liver disease. The list goes on. That's just sort of the big ones. Yeah, training is really great for reducing these overall factors, right? One of the ones that's super awesome is that training helps improve insulin sensitivity. If you are a person who is pre-diabetic or has type 2 diabetes, or even type 1 diabetes, improving, training more will increase your insulin sensitivity such that we don't have as aggressive as spikes in blood sugar when we eat slightly sugary foods. One of the other things that I didn't even add to this that training does is it increases resting metabolism. As we train, we build muscle. And when we build muscle, our muscles act like sugar sponges. They absorb all the calories that we eat. And that's how they improve the insulin sensitivity, as well as improving the amount of calories that you burn in a day at rest. I eat a lot of food these days because I've been training for a very long time. And I'll be honest, it's really nice to be able to, have a pretty wide range of things that I can eat and still feel very healthy, right? Exercise also improves sleep quality. I'm sure everyone can, remember a time in their life where they did some really tough exercise of some form and then slept very well that night. Yeah, the research is pretty clear on this, that as we train more, we sleep better, right? We see improvements in liver function through reduction in fatty acids in the liver. We see improvements in the lipid profile through reductions in triglycerides. We see improvements in cholesterol through reductions in bad cholesterol and improvements in good cholesterol. We see reductions in systemic inflammation. So the list is long, right? I think we all knew some of these things to one extent or another. We all, like I said at the very beginning, we all know exercise is good for us, but I really did want to take the opportunity to really list out, a lot of these to sort of say, look at all these things that exercise does for us, right? And to note here, all of these previously mentioned positive health effects are true for exercise regardless of weight loss. And this is a big one, right? I think that people have a tendency to sometimes view exercise as a way to lose body fat or get to a certain body composition. And all of the things that I just mentioned before, these effects occur without any weight loss at all, right? So this idea that we should only use exercise to burn calories and lose weight, and that's the only way in which we see improvements in our body composition, in our overall health, it's just not true. So exercise anyway, do it. It's good for you. Exercise and mental health. Like I said, this is something that's super impactful for me, and the research has become more and more clear on this. Exercise releases dopamine, serotonin, and noradrenaline in the brain. These are all different neurotransmitters that have overall positive effects on the body. Serotonin is a neurotransmitter that, quote, mediates satisfaction, happiness, and optimism. If you're anything like me and have taken or have had struggled with depression in the past, oftentimes for depression, they will mental health professionals will prescribe an SSRI, a selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor, which is a really fancy way of trying to increase the amount of serotonin in a person to improve their overall mood and their overall sort of happiness score, right? Dopamine is a, quote, critical modulator of both learning and motivation, and is often identified as a feel-good chemical. We get little hits of dopamine all the time in our lives, right? If you're anything like I am and spend too much time scrolling Instagram, you see, something new or interesting every time we find some little clickbait thing on Instagram, we get a small hit of dopamine. Dopamine is good. Dopamine is a very good, it's a really important neurotransmitter because it helps with the transmission of information in the body. I shouldn't say information. It helps with the transmission of other neurotransmitters. Exercise and mental health continued. This part gets a little bit dense. I like my studies. So stick with me here while I read out the barrage of words I put on the page here. A 2016 meta-analysis by Kavam and colleagues studying the effect of exercise on the treatment of depression found that, quote, exercise compared to no intervention yielded a large and significant effect size, and exercise had a moderate and significant effect compared to usual care. So exercise is awesome for improving mental health. This next study is a really impactful one that's come out in the past 2 or 3 years. This study, encompassing 97 reviews, 1,039 trials, and over 100,000 participants, revealed that, quote, physical activity is highly beneficial for improving symptoms of depression, anxiety, and distress across a wide range of adult populations, including the general population, people with diagnosed mental health disorders, and people with chronic disease. The researcher, Dr. Ben Singh, also noted, we also find that all types of physical activity and exercise are beneficial, including aerobic exercise such as walking, resistance bands, or resistance training, Pilates, and yoga. Importantly, the research shows that it doesn't take much for exercise to make a positive change to your mental health. I think one of the things we have a tendency to think sometimes when it comes to exercise is that to really get all of these benefits that we talked about, that I've been talking about, that you have to, train 5 or 6 days a week for an hour and a half. And the research doesn't really support that. One of the things, and I'll talk about this more as we get later in the presentation here, is that exercise follows a dose-response relationship, such that the more that we do, the better our mental health outcomes are, and just overall health outcomes as well. So yeah, like I said, we don't need to really engage in hours and hours and hours of really high strenuous activity to see positive improvements in our overall health, particularly mental health. So yeah, like I said, through all this, we know that exercise is good for us. Like I said, this is not particularly new information, right? But how do we go about doing it, right? The CDC and other health organizations like the American Red Cross and the Mayo Clinic recommend adults to get 150 minutes of moderate intensity activity each week and 2 days of muscle strengthening activities. Moderate intensity activity sounds more challenging than you might think. Moderate intensity exercise is defined by the CDC as any exercise that elevates your heart rate to between 64 and 76% of your maximum heart rate. This is all very fancy, but what does this actually mean? Around that 65-ish percent of your max heart rate is going to feel like a somewhat challenging walk. You're walking at, maybe 2.5, 3 miles an hour, right? Like, we really don't need to push the envelope that aggressively to get into this heart rate range. If you guys have ever done any kind of like high intensity interval training or any kind of like boot camp class or anything like that, your heart rate's got to go way higher than this. And if you ever step on a treadmill and actually sort of do the math and figure out what your max heart rate is and figure out the percentage, you'll be surprised at how much easier this is than you think. Like I said, that walking speed of around like 3.5 miles an hour, and it depends on the individual, right? But this is something that, the moderate intensity exercise as defined by the CDC is not nearly as challenging as you might think. So yeah, that's great. I mean, we don't have to work quite as hard to get the benefits that we're looking for, right? And so these muscle strengthening activities includes lifting weights, yoga, using fans, climbing stairs, hiking, cycling, dance, and heavy gardening. Heavy gardening? Is that you're picking up pretty heavy stuff with this? Okay, I don't know. That was just in there, so I included that. Huh. So that's gonna maybe think about that for a bit. What is heavy gardening? So you guys might be thinking that's too much. 150 minutes? Like, I don't have time for that. Like, wait. So we're gonna watch this guy. This is from one of my favorite shows recently, Schitt's Creek. If anybody else is a fan, it's a great show. It's very stupid. But yeah, like I said earlier, right? Exercise follows a dose-response relationship, which is really cool. Meaning that we don't. It's not like if we get 149 minutes of moderate intensity exercise that we get zero benefits, right? Like, the more we do, the more we get benefits from. So I think oftentimes people have a tendency to be focused on this 150 minutes. Man, that feels really high. Like, I'm really busy this week. I don't really know how I'm gonna do that. Well, the good news is you don't necessarily have to. Not every week, right? Like, some weeks are gonna be harder than others, right? And it's and I'm sure you've heard this phrase at some point in the fitness industry, and it's very true. Something is always better than nothing, right? Like, a study of 19 observational studies and 15 randomized controlled trials shows that, quote, there is a fairly strong evidence to show a graded dose-response relationship between the total volume of weekly physical activity and cardiorespiratory fitness. So, like I said, sort of dose-response relationship means that the larger the dose, the bigger the response, right? But that is to say that, it's not no response at all if we're not doing as much as we might like, right? So yeah, one of the things I always talk about with clients all the time is that, do your best, right? There are certain weeks where it's going to be really crazy, where you're really not going to be able to get outside and walk around as much as you might like, or you may not be able to hit the gym or whatever physical activity it is that you like to do. And that's okay, right? Like, you still get benefits from doing these things, even if we aren't hitting these recommended amounts by the CDC and other organizations, right? And one of the things that I wanted to include here is that walking is exercise. Like, I don't know where this idea came from that walking doesn't count, because it does. Walking is awesome. Walking reduces anxiety and depression, improves bone density, relieves joint pain, improves sleep. Like, the list of things that walking does for us is fantastic, right? It improves our total daily energy expenditure. Walking outside, getting a little bit of sun, right? These are things that are super good for us. And this is exercise. If we're walking at a pretty slow clip, does it qualify as moderate or maybe really high intensity exercise? No, probably not. But that's not to say that we don't benefit from this, right? There's even some studies that show that walking can actually reduce the onset of Alzheimer's. As you start to walk a little, as you get older, it can literally improve symptoms of Alzheimer's. Walking's great. Do it. Walk around. And sort of biggest takeaways here, right? Exercise is really good for your mental health and can be about as effective as treating depression as an antidepressant. This is super cool. And this was something that really struck home for me when I was young. I was struggling with depression. I was on medication, and I wasn't seeing the results that I was looking for in terms of symptom relief of improving my mental health, my depression symptoms. And I found this study, which I tried to find again, and I couldn't. But there are some other ones more recently that do show this to be true. There's even actually one that showed that exercise can be like 1.5 or even 2 times as effective in treating depression as an SSRI or any other type of antidepressant. But yeah, like I said, when I came across this study from a while back, this one really struck home for me. It's like, damn it, I'm still struggling with depression. This is something that's really been bothering me. I feel like I have to go to the gym, right? With this study, being so profound in how it treats anxiety and depression, I was like, man, if I really want to say to myself at the end of the day that I'm doing everything I can to improve my mental health, and I'm not doing some type of training throughout the week, I'm missing out, right? So yeah, exercise is really great. Just like I've been saying through this entire presentation, exercise is awesome for anxiety and depression. Like other takeaways, like I said, exercise and positive health outcomes follow a dose-response relationship. We don't have to train 6 days a week for 2 hours to get some positive benefits from this stuff. And one of the things that I tell clients all the time is that when we're getting started, if you've been sedentary for a while, maybe you haven't been able to get to the gym, or maybe, just haven't been able to exercise as much as you might like, to improve your physical fitness on what you're doing right now is all we need to do is just do a little bit more stuff than last time, right? So, if maybe things have been really crazy for you and you haven't been able to move around or get to the gym in weeks, if we do literally one training session for half an hour where we're lifting something that's maybe a little bit heavy and get our heart rate up a little bit, we can see improvements in our mental and physical health from that, right? Like we really don't have to dive into the deep end here, right? 2 times a week of resistance training is what the CDC recommends. You can see really, really awesome results doing that. I've been in the personal training industry for years, and I've had clients that I've trained 2 times a week for literally like 2 years. And I most recently had a client who I've been training for twice a week for, I think more recently we did increase to 45 minutes, but I've been training her twice a week for 45 minutes in the past several months, and she just deadlifted 150 pounds at 64 years old, right? Like you can see really, really good results on just twice a week, right? And the one thing that I think is really important to remember is exercise is good for you regardless of weight loss, right? I think oftentimes, like I said, people have a tendency to associate exercise as a means to an end in terms of getting to a certain body composition, losing a certain amount of body fat, and that's really the only way it's going to be impactful for our physical health. And that's just not true. Exercise is medicine, truly. And definitely take your medication too. don't not do that. But also exercise too. And like I said, walking, it's great. I don't know who decided that it's not exercise, but I have a bone to pick with that because it is. It's good for you. And this is something that I need to record. I'm glad this is being recorded so I can play this back to myself when I stay inside all the time and don't go outside at all and don't walk around, because now I can hear myself yell at me about walking outside and getting outside, right? That's it. Yeah, that was my presentation. Thank you so much for joining. Yeah, come train with me. I do Zoom trainings. I do in-person trainings. Zoom trainings we can do increments of half an hour, 45 minutes, or an hour. If you're in the DMV area, particularly if you're in the Bethesda area or further north, I can come do some in-person training with you. I have a bunch of equipment myself. Thank you so much for listening. I appreciate everyone for joining. And any questions for me, I guess?
You maybe want to go take a walk. So that's very fun. I have a question.
Please.
I was personal training in I want to say 2008, 2009, and the Surgeon General made some big announcement that you need 45 minutes of exercise a day, like 5 times a week. And everything exploded. And like, no, suddenly everybody that was happy with their, progress and things we were doing was immediately just like full of anxiety and wanted to do more and more and more. And by the way, that was the only time in my whole career that I had people get injuries, was when they were like, no, I have to start doing 45 minutes. What do you say to people when they really believe that um, they need to be doing like an hour a day or an hour at a time, or like, how do you deal with that? What do you do?
So I'd probably tell them that exercise follows a dose response relationship, such that if you increase the amount of the dose of training stress that you're applying via doing more training sessions per week, the research says that you will see better, improvements in overall physical and mental health from that, right?
Mm-hmm.
But once again, that's not to say that you're not going to see those with what you're doing now. And I would also probably argue as well that these things are probably highly individualistic, right? These studies are on a population level. Some people and some people like me, I feel the need to train a lot. I really like this stuff. I train in, 5 or 6 days a week, and really pushing my body in the gym is something that I really enjoy. And if I do a whole heck of a lot less than that, to just, 1 or 2 times a week, I do start to see some of these, my depression will pop up a little bit more. My anxiety will pop up a little bit more. Right. But, you know, like I said, like these studies are on a population level, right? Such that, and there's so much inter-individual variation between people. You could be a person that, you can train 2 or 3 times a week and hit your 150 minutes per the CDC and feel really good with that and see great results. And, your blood looks really good. Your cholesterol is low, your blood pressure is managed, right? Like, this idea that we must train this much or we don't see any benefits at all is not true.
Thank you. Marie?
Marie?
I have a question. Could you talk about having fun during workouts? How do you like to have fun with your clients?
Sure. That's a great question. This is something that I'm super passionate about, because to really see, benefits from training and being more active, we kind of got to do it. We got to keep doing it, right? And, if we really hate it, it's going to be really hard to do, right? I often, like, when I'm sitting down with clients and talking with them about how much they want to be training per week, I often use the example of myself. If I set a goal to train, 6 times a week, running on a treadmill for an hour, that's going to fail. I hate running. I've talked with all my friends trying to figure out a way that to not possibly hate running, and I haven't come up with anything. I don't want to do it. I'm going to do other types of cardio activities. I'll swim, I'll bike, I'll hike, whatever, right? Like, but no running. I'm done with it. And that's because, like, I know that setting a goal of 6 times a week of an hour of me on the treadmill, it is going to fail, right? Because I hate it. I don't want to do that. So finding things to do, some type of physical activity that you don't absolutely hate, I think is a huge priority, right? Because like I said, and sort of like the research shows, right, to really see, the benefits of this stuff, unfortunately, we don't just get to do it once and then we're good, right? We have to keep doing it. So finding things to do either in the gym or other types of physical activity altogether that I usually say don't hate, because, I like sitting on a patio and drinking a beer, right? Like that. I really like doing that, right? But, sometimes with physical activity, we do kind of have to push ourselves to do some stuff, right? In that, we may not absolutely love it in the way that I like sitting on the patio drinking a beer. So yeah, I guess to wrap that up, like, I think it's really, really worth exploring all the different avenues of physical activity to find something that resonates with you, right? For myself, lifting really heavy things feels good. I don't know whether there's like some masculine component to that. I don't know what that is for me, but I really like doing that. I really like pushing myself in that way. And, you know, I truly believe that if people look hard enough and really explore all different avenues of training, of physical activity in general, that they will be able to find something that they can do that not only they don't hate it, but actually might really like. Um, there are thousands of different ways with which we can move our bodies around, right? This idea that we must do it this way, we must do it that way. I think oftentimes people have a tendency to be very caught up on, and I myself sort of subscribe or have issues with this at times. Oftentimes people are caught up on what is sort of like the optimal approach to getting the best results here, right? Like, well, we can think about that as much as we want, and maybe we should at points, but if we are, struggling to train twice a week, if we're struggling to go on walks, let's start there, right? Like me doing this 6 days a week at training thing that I've been doing for the past few years, like it didn't start with that. It started with me lifting once or twice a week kind of thing, right? And then I kind of really fell in love with powerlifting for a while. It's like, oh, this is really cool. I want to try to deadlift as much as I can. That sounds fun. It's like, this is kind of boring. I want to move into something else. So then I got really into Olympic weightlifting for a while, right? Like, and as you do more exercise and as you grow, you'll have different goals and priorities, and that's awesome. I think it's super important to find things that you like to do because, like I said, we don't get to just do this once and reap all the benefits from it, unfortunately. Right? So taking the time to find some things that we can do that we really like is totally worth the time and effort. It's something that I really try to focus on with my clients. Great question. Any other questions, comments, concerns, snide remarks?
If I'm a new person and I've never exercised and I don't know you and I don't know how it works to do online training, tell me what happens in my first session.
So the first thing that's going to happen is that we're going to talk. We're going to talk about what you've been up to, what training you have done, what training you liked, what training you didn't like. We'll talk about what kind of pain and injuries you have. For most people, that list is not zero, unfortunately. And we'll talk about the goals that you have in fitness, as far as like, we're trying to improve our cardiorespiratory fitness. We're trying to build some strength, build some muscle, whatever, right? We're going to spend a good bit of time talking on that. I find it really important to spend time talking with clients about their previous experiences in training, because that's really going to help me figure out what stuff we should try and what stuff we, really want to avoid, right? It's like I said, finding that thing that we like is super important, right? So, I go to make a plan for you that involves doing a bunch of burpees, and you're like, Brian, I absolutely hate burpees. Just to be clear, like, I won't make anybody do burpees unless all of a sudden you guys decide you want to. Like, I think burpees are horrible. Anyway, so yeah, as far as like what the actual training looks like, it's highly dependent on the individual. It's often dependent as well on the equipment they have access to. I've done online trainings before with people who have no equipment at all, and we're focused more on just trying to get our heart rate up a little bit. So, we'll start with a real basic warm up, and really, like, one of the things that I find really important with this process is to find a good entry point. Find a group of exercises, a way to train that feels okay, that doesn't feel like you're going to puke. Because not only does that really create a bad feedback loop and then we really start to hate exercise that way, but if we're pushing ourselves that hard when we're getting started with training, injury risk is going to be higher. You're not going to be able to recover well enough between training sessions. So the very first training session that I do with new clients is easy. And it's easy because that's all we need to do to get the adaptations that we're looking for, right? One of the bigger ideas and more important concepts in terms of how we progress, either in building strength, muscle, improving our cardiorespiratory fitness, is an idea called progressive overload, which is a very fancy way of saying we want to just do a little bit more than we did last time. Well, if we've been out of the gym for a little while, or if we haven't been training as much as we might like, A little bit more could just be, just doing a handful of steps where maybe we'll get some bands going. We'll do some, do some lateral raises, right? Like we'll, just get you moving and start with that, right? Like, and sort of, and see how you respond, see how you feel after that, right? Like, um, one of the an important idea that I really try to focus on with clients is to get the right dose of training stress, right? We want to push you this much more than you're capable, right? The body adapts relatively slowly to these things, unfortunately. I think we'd all love to be able to hit the gym 1 or 2 times and build a bunch of muscle and fully sideway anyway. But these things adapt. These things happen pretty slowly, such that if we do too much in the first time that I see you, not only will you may not even be able to recover from it, you're going to be really sore. Injury risk could be a little bit higher with that, right? Like, so yeah, I guess to answer the question, the first session is going to be dependent on, what you're really interested in, what stuff you've done in the past, what equipment you have access to, and what your fitness level is now. I always tell clients on the first session that you're going to be done and you're going to feel like you did mostly nothing. And you still might be sore. And that's awesome, honestly. One of the things that I tell clients is like, one of the things that I like to talk about a lot with clients is what's called training sensitivity. And it's this idea more or less that says that, based on your level of training and fitness, your training sensitivity will go up or down. So for someone like myself who's been training pretty darn consistently for the past 8 or 10 years, my sensitivity to training is very low, meaning that I really kind of have to like beat myself over the head with a bat to to get my body to adapt and build more strength and build more muscle, right? If we've been out of the gym for a while, we haven't been training for a little while, your body's going to be really sensitive to training, meaning that we can do, really, really not that much, and your body will adapt to that. And that's great, right? Nobody gets jacked off of one really good workout. We build strength and muscle over the course of one really good workout after another. That is one that's like slightly more challenging than we did last time, right? I always tell clients that if you are at bare minimum maintaining your strength or your fitness levels and or improving when you can, you're always going in the right direction, right? So yeah, like I said, there's no race with this stuff. We don't have to move a certain amount of weight in a certain amount of time, right? Like I'm gonna meet you where you're at, and we're gonna just build upon it. That's really it. Marie.
If we do a virtual session, what kind of equipment do I need to have at home?
So it kind of depends. We could literally do no equipment at all, but just a little bit of equipment can go a long way, right? So having some lighter dumbbells could be really helpful. Having some bands could be really helpful. I usually encourage people to get bands because honestly, you can go on Amazon and buy, a set of bands for like less than $20 kind of thing. And throughout, I did a lot of virtual training through COVID with clients, and everybody was trying to get gym equipment at the time, and a lot of people didn't have very much. So there's a lot that you can do with virtually no equipment. At one point, I think I had one of my clients picking up bags of rice that she had around the house, right? Like we can be creative here, right? Like one of my favorite things to do in the fitness industry is to remove barriers. So when people tell me that they can't train because of X, Y, or Z and they don't have access to equipment, I say, BS, we can do something. We always can, right? So ideally more equipment is better, right? But if you have literally nothing, we can still do an effective workout for you, right? Yeah, good question.
I bought a bunch of bags of beans at the beginning of COVID. So if anybody needs them, I still have them because I use 0 of those bags of beans. They're very heavy.
Yeah.
Any more questions? Anybody? All right. Thank you so much, Brian. This was very fun and energizing for me. I hope it was for you guys too. Anybody that is associated with Virginia Health Counseling in any way, however infrequent, gets 2 free personal training sessions every year. So use them. We are doing that because it's good for you and it works and it makes a difference. hopefully you do more than 2 a year, but maybe you just meet twice a year for him to tell you what you can do when you're not seeing him. Don't care. Just do something. Just start making a little change. Plus it's going to be fun because he's delightful. So it's
I agree.
Brian
I think I'm
at
delightful too.
Virginia Health Counseling, and he does all his own scheduling and all of that stuff. So just reach out to him and make it your own. So thank you guys for being here. I know it's really pretty outside, so
yeah, thank you all for coming inside and listening to me on such a beautiful day. And the last thing I'll add here too is one of the things I do a lot with my clients is I'll like do one session a week with me and then maybe 1 or 2 sessions on your own. I'll sort of give you like homework assignments, right? I sort of recognize that, you know, meeting with a trainer 4 times a week can get a little pricey, right? And I really want to help people in literally whatever way I can. And I think offering lots of different options and having the ability to do some sessions on your own is a really good way to go about that. So yeah, if you're not trying to train with me 4 times a week, I totally understand. We can definitely work something out where you do some stuff on your own, or you know, we'll figure it all out. But thank you so much for Michelle. Thank you all for coming. I really appreciate it. Anything else you want to say here, Michelle? Or?
No, I think that's it. Go take a walk, everybody.
There you go. Hey, that's what I said. I got to do it. It's a beautiful day. I'm going to get outside right after this. I promise.
All right. Thanks so much, Brian. Thank you, Julie.
All right. Thank you very much, guys.
Everybody.
I really appreciate it.
Bye.
You.